Chapter 15. Time marches on. In 8th grade, the pressure about the horses was waning. This would be the last year Jane was home. The next year she would be in college. Dad realized that I was not going to be tortured by the horses anymore. I loved feeding them, brushing them, playing with them, but never in my life would I sit upon a horse and give them power to abuse me ever again. I was so elated at the thought of getting rid of them. So Dad bought me a motorcycle. Mechanical, I could control. He bought me a 90cc knobby tired yellow dirt bike. I loved that thing. I could finally go where I wanted to go. There wasn't any place to go, but I could go there. Two of my girlfriends got them too, and we were like a little gang. We formed a little motorcycle gang. Nancy Sinatra singing "These Boots Are Made for Walking," and life seemed to get a little brighter with possibilities. I was into band and was a majorette. I learned to twirl, and when I went to majorette camp, I brought home a fire baton. The fire baton was fun, and they gave us quite a bit of training before sending us back to our respective schools. Dad was thrilled, as this fit right into the family theme. A little No. 2 fuel oil was recommended, but later we used kerosene. Dad realized that No. 2 fuel oil and kerosene are very similar, and kerosene was way easier to obtain. It didn't make any difference. Several of my friends also had them, and for a little town it was fun. Friday nights and we be playing with fire in front of the crowds at the hometown football game. We were pretty good, and the hometown crowd loved it. My girlfriend Jane lit her hair on fire one Friday night, so we started putting her hair up. We could throw and spin, catch and twirl. Usually started the grass on fire a little, and we could be covered with soot at the end. I think they even turned the stadium lights off once or twice for us. It's probably too dangerous to do nowadays with all the current safety concerns. For all of this, we had outfits to make. Luckily for us, most of our mothers were good seamstresses. There would be no ordering a fancy outfit out of the magazines, but we could copy them. We did a pretty good job. The home economics class took us to Saginaw to buy fabrics, and we bought the best our money could buy. I bet we looked like a bunch of ragamuffins getting off the bus that day. Band offered us a lot of experiences that we would not have enjoyed had we not been for competitions in marching. Solo and ensemble was one of the competitions, and it was usually held over to Flint Northern. This school is bigger than our whole town. We could not get bus transportation, so we had to load up all the equipment into cars and trucks. The car I was in had a tuba and drum tied into the little trunk. The back seat had other drums and our instruments. The other vehicles were also loaded, as Dad would say, "Loaded for bear," and off we went. We drove over to I-75 and south at 75 miles an hour. Probably way too fast for the car I was in, but we had to keep up. Then something funny happened. The hood popped up. I don't care how hard you squint, you cannot see through a car hood. People were trying to get away from us as we slid over a lane or two and got off the freeway with our heads hanging out of the windows. It was terrifying, but really funny. One of the boys, Dan or Mark, took off his belt and tied the hood to the front bumper. Then we checked the load in the trunk and headed on down the road. We did a pretty good job that day for a little country band saddled with a dumb band director. When I was 13 and Jane was 17, we decided to go downtown for some snacks. I drove the 90cc motorcycle and she rode on the back. We had 2 helmets, so we were good to go. State police had other ideas. We drove right downtown into a police net. They were stopping everyone at the east side of town. I saw the action, but it was not going that far. I stopped and parked, and we were slipping into the grocery store when I felt a hand upon my shoulder. Damn! Nobody ever thought about Kingston. Why are they thinking about us now? The officer made Jane drive out to the farmhouse, and he followed. Did I mention my dad liked to drink? He was in the basement farting around with something, and Mother was in the house. Out she came to a lecturing state trooper. He lectured her about letting me drive and the liability. Did she understand the liability? Well, Mother sold insurance, and she knew full well the liability, but had no control over Dad and what he bought the kids. She did not say this to the state trooper, but it was obvious to Jane and me that she was steaming with anger. Now, Dad, he stayed in the basement. We could see his eyes looking out the tiny basement window onto the porch. He could just peek out at our feet, and Jane and I both caught his eyes several times. He stayed where he was, but he got blasted for hanging Mother with a government man all by herself. Jane and I both got tickets that day. She for allowing me to drive, and I got one for driving underage and speeding and had to go to court. I was so nervous, like that was anything new. The date was set and off we went. Dad had to take us and pay the fine, according to Mother. We sat in the outer chambers for what seemed like an eternity. Soon it was my turn. We entered the judge's chambers, and the judge stood up, extended his hand, and said, "Bob, good to see ya." Oh, thank God my dad knew the judge. The judge decided the cop was wrong and that my motorcycle could not go 55 miles an hour, so he knocked that down to 40. Then he said to me, "I know I won't keep you off the road, so you're going to have to take driver's education." He fined me $25, but Jane was charged $35. Dad paid both fines and we left. Driver's education was a hoot. I would drive the motorcycle over to Carroll, the county seat, park a little ways away from the police station and walk in. Then reverse this action to drive home. No one would go with me except the last day. Dad drove me over with the motorcycle in a carrier that attached to the bumper. I had to prove I had learned something. Most of the people were being retrained and older. I was the only 13-year-old student. When I was 15, I took the school-sponsored driver's education classes. This was in the day when driver's education was included in the school curriculum. Some of us had been driving for years. Others had never sat in the driver's seat. One of the girls squealed the car across the parking lot when she gently pushed on the gas, and I mean squealed. We were all over the place for this instructor, but he didn't seem to mind a bit. When my day came to drive, we met at the school and climbed into the car. I was to drive first. The instructor wanted to go south towards the back way to Mayville. This road used to scare me, but I loved it on the motorcycle, so I figured if I was driving, I would love it in the car. Off we went. I was actually pretty good, and the instructor asked me my history. I told him about the El Camino and the motorcycle. He picked his nose for a couple miles and then said, "Head to Lapeer," and promptly fell asleep. We arrived at his little ranch house, and he went inside for 3 hours. When he came out, the other student drove back to Kingston, and that was the end of my driver's education. I made lots of money mowing and babysitting. One job I sort of fell into was taking care of my neighbor's girl, Tina. I loved Tina. She would get dropped off at 5 a.m., sleep on the couch until we got up, have breakfast with us, and then go off to school. I made good money for making up the couch at night and practically did nothing else. One job I hated every spring was to burn off the old haystack. We would have a pretty moldy stack of hay by spring, and it was filled with mice. We loved fire, firecrackers, fireworks, fire chief, and fire batons. You see, my family did have a theme. Dad would come out of the house after a little nip, carrying a lighter fluid can. He would cover the stack of hay with lighter fluid, making sure it was a continuous line. Then we each took a side and lit the whole stack on fire at once. He always made sure we lit the whole stack at once, at the same time. Oh, the squeals from the mice trying to get out. None did, of course, but the squeals haunted me. The days of the haystack were almost over.